Hi, Larry.
Hi. Good evening. Okay, we're all.
Oh, and just before we start, we lost our receptionist in the law department, and she was the one that would make edits to the minutes and everything like that. So I was wondering if Cheryl, after the meeting, I'll send her an email. If Cheryl could forward me the minutes from our last meeting in Word format, September 15th. So that I could make any changes that the board has to make. And if any other meeting minutes come in the future, if they could just come to my attention, that'd be great. Thank you.
Perfect. We'll make sure to have extra stuff for you to revise. Let's call this motion to order. It's 7:03. Roll call. We have Tony, Nora, Cara, and Michael. And I believe you could see the names spelled out. Do we have anybody from the public?
No, we do not.
All right. That makes that part easy. We will go right into the acceptance of the August minutes. The three of us are here. Do I have a motion from Nora or Tony to approve August minutes?
I move to approve the August minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Cara will abstain.
Yep, I'm abstaining.
And so approved. Now to go into how the ordinance committee meeting went. I know Brian just touched on it a little. Essentially, the ordinance committee felt they still had a little revising to do. I had mentioned to them that, we had gone over it and spent hours in different meetings going over it, that we were good with our end of it. And I didn't want to create extra work because they wanted to tweak what we had. They decided that even though they were still tweaking it on their end and we're going to kick the can for another month, that we should look at it one more time. And if there's anything we want to add, then we can let them know. So I believe this meeting will be fairly short. We also have a great debate later that we all want to get to, I'm sure. Riveting TV. And so I think if we just take 2 to 3 minutes to read over section 32.4. Brian, the copy you sent us, is that their latest edits to us?
Sure. So I believe, and I have to go find the email I sent you guys. Was it a red line version or was it a clean version?
Green version, I'm looking, well.
It was both.
It was
Yeah,
both. Okay.
it
Yeah.
was both.
So what I did was in Word format, because I didn't know, some people like to look at Word because they can make changes to it and make edits. The red line version has all of the changes that we have made and all of the changes that the ordinance committee has made. And the clean version is basically what it would look like if we didn't make any changes at all. So if we do make changes, I will make them in the red line version and save that. And I will then remove all of the edits so that everyone can see what the clean version looks like of what we come up with. And I will send you each a copy of that, and I will forward it on to the ordinance committee in advance of the meeting so that they can take a look at it. And hopefully they'll be able to move this forward to a public hearing after their next meeting, which is in November, obviously.
So Brian, once again, the red reflects which version that they?
Sure. So the red line version incorporates all of the changes that the Board of Ethics has made to 32.4 over the last 2+ years. But it also includes changes that were made or recommended by the ordinance committee at their last 1 or 2, 3 meetings at most. Specifically, substantially, the change that the ordinance committee made, you'll see right underneath 32.4. It says conflict of interest means any of the following. and then it identifies 1, A, B, C, D, and then 2. And that's really the big change that they made. And then underneath subsection A, conflict of interest, there might be some minor changes that they requested, but most of those changes are the work that the Board of Ethics made in the previous 2 meetings. So really the big change is 1, A, B, C, D, and 2 under conflict of interest means any of the following. So that's really the big change that the ordinance committee made.
So my recommendation for right now is let's take 2 to 3 minutes to actually read through just 32.4A, 1 and 2, and see if there's anything that we want to point out on it. Not belabor the point, but try to look at it with fresh eyes for 2 to 3 minutes. And then in that time, I will check in to see if anybody has thoughts. So make your notes and then we'll go over it. Thirty more seconds. Tony, are you ready? You're on mute. All right, we'll skip.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Is there anything that I figure we'll go one at a time. Is there anything that stands out to you with section 32.4A, 1 or 2?
No, I'm not seeing not seeing anything that really sticks out.
Oh, perfect. No, we've gone over this. I just want to check in. Nora.
I don't see, the other thing is that I'm not seeing too much of a difference from the unchanged version also, because I was trying to compare the two, but I don't, unless I missed it, and I try to read it as quick as I could, but I'm not seeing any difference.
Yeah,
Tony, are you talking about the clean version that I sent?
Yeah, against the red, right.
Yeah, so the reason why there's no difference is because when I'm taking the red and I remove all of the track changes, it turns it into a clean version. So those two are identical. 32.4, the 32.4 that you're looking at is significantly different than the 32.4 that's currently in the Code of Ethics.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Nora, you get a chance to look. Would you like to have any comments?
I do. Sorry, I've got a few things.
Sure.
So first, I think now that they have made the opening a conflict of interest means any of the following.
Mm-hmm.
I think having one start with a conflict of interest arises doesn't make a great deal of sense.
Mm.
So I would say a conflict of interest means any of the following, and then I'd cut out that whole first bit there and say it means when
There is a direct.
there is a direct.
Yep.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Um,
And just so you all know, the one thing that just popped into my head as Nora mentioned this was that, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but how I heard what the ordinance committee was doing with this section that you just looked at was they were trying to provide a guide. It's not all inclusive. That was how I understood it.
Correct.
yeah, and it makes sense with the include but not limited to
Yeah.
in there.
Yep.
I am a little nervous about the personal interest as opposed to a financial interest, because you have a personal interest, for instance, in being promoted. So you have a personal interest in the success of a project you've proposed, right?
Mhm.
And that is nonetheless not a conflict of interest. So I'm a touch nervous that that is a too broad term.
You're talking about C, a direct personal conflict of interest?
Well, yes, but I'm also just talking about in the very first line of 1.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Indirect
Indirect
personal,
personal
yeah. Direct
financial.
or indirect, yeah.
So, I mean, we might want to, classify that as we might want to, add some modifiers, material personal interest or a personal interest unrelated to the subject matter of their employment. I mean, just like, that just seems a bit too broad to me.
Okay.
And then,
So if we were to follow Nora's thought process, which I think is a good suggestion, I think we would have to separate out, when there's a direct or indirect personal interest, and then put some kind of caveat, as she was mentioning, or a financial interest. So, because obviously financial interest would be dealt with differently. So just throw that out there.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I think that that's the point. And then, I'm also, I feel like there's a lot of words. I'm just trying to think about how it could easily be rearranged. I'll give some more thought to it. But then I did also want to flag to that point then, similarly with C, with little c, I think, again, significant of importance to the officer and employee, might, material importance, material financial, there needs to be some greater, there needs to be something there that explains what that means. Because, I feel significant pride in my job. It is significantly important to me that this matter gets resolved the way that I think it should be resolved is a very different thing. It has to be a significant importance outside of the job function.
And you're talking about in 1C?
Pardon?
Yes,
You're talking about
1C.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, Lori just sent an email saying she's not gonna be able to make it to me, so I told her we have 4, so it's not a big deal.
Thank you.
Okay. And I actually, to that point, I feel like in little d, the improper benefit is actually much clearer than the, personal interest. And so that might be some language that we might think about if there's some way that we can use that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me play contrarian for a second. Is in other parts of the code, we've discussed wanting to have discretion and, keeping it broad so we can have discretion. And I agree with what Nora is saying from looking at it in just this one paragraph. And yet, if the discretion is the concern, this is consistent with other parts of the code where we're not going to use it against somebody who is doing well at their job and taking pride in their job, etc. It's when they go outside of the lines, if you will. So that would be my counter argument. If we put the caveat that we're mentioning, it opens us up to potentially being too specific or not specific enough and still under the discretionary thing. So I'm open, Nora, to what you were saying and recommending, and I'll hear what Tony and Cara have to say, but just to play the contrarian view for a second.
And Michael, and that in general, I completely agree with you.
Mhm.
But I think that if you look at the language that existed before,
Mhm.
So gain or lose any benefit that is common to the public or general interest of the public, and even where we had personal before, on little 5, engage in any business or transaction or have a personal, immediate family or business interest. That combination of personal, family, business interest there, I feel like is a much it gives people a better indication of the kinds of interests that we're talking about. Whereas when it's separated, where it just says personal or financial, I don't know. I foresee us having a lot of people come back with the concerns that I have, that personal seems too broad.
Well,
Nora,
It's felt
as
more
a-
limited
Nora-
in the other contexts.
Nora,
is
just
all.
to jump in on number 5, the
Yep.
reason that you say that is because they're talking about, personal, immediate, family, or business interest, and they're talking about that is impairs their independence of judgment and the proper discharge of their duties. So if they're doing something in terms of business interest, the way the business interest is being differentiated is obviously it's not going to be there's not going to be an interest that you have in your job as an officer or employee in properly discharging it. The interest would have to be a business interest outside of your normal job.
But I
Right.
believe, you see,
I mean,
think,
basically, Brian, I think our previous definition was better than what the ordinance committee has come up with. Sorry.
No,
My apologies.
don't be sorry. No, don't apologize. Tony, go, and then Cara will give you a shot to jump in here.
but as you were saying before, Michael, and not to belittle what Nora is saying, but we had discussed that, and we went over that there were other areas, and I thought we discussed it at length. I thought we were in general agreement that kind of like what Brian was just saying, the same thing, where there's other provisions that capture the context of what is intended in the language, and is limited by the context of the other provisions.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Nora.
I thought we had discussed that, and we kind of really went into a great detail, I thought, too.
Correct.
Nora,
And
so I think, are you referring, when you were saying that you like the definition better, in the version that you guys have in front of you, in A, under conflicts of interest, it's just below 1 and 2. That appears to be what we had before at the top. That was kind of the introduction to conflicts of interest. Is that what you're referring to? Where it says a conflict of interest exists whenever an officer or employee will more likely than not benefit disproportionately from other citizens of the city, directly or indirectly, from a decision over which they have influence, 1. And then 2, in the event an officer or employee of the city has a known conflict of interest, he or she shall disclose it in writing to their supervisor, and the supervisor shall file the written disclosure statement with the city clerk. If such conflict is material, the officer or employee with the declared conflict shall recuse himself or herself from taking any action with regard to the city related to the conflicting transaction, business interest, including but not limited to participating in discussions, meetings, or votes involving the conflicting interest, except as provided in subsection C.
Right. I'm really fine with all of that. I mean, I'm fine with the way that all got rearranged. I agreed with that last time. All I'm simply saying is that I think that the section below that, which remember is what we initially had proposed moving up, which is this a sort of idea that about a gain or lose any benefit that is not common to the general interest of the public. Like I'm not trying to relitigate all this. I don't remember what we settled on last time being quite as general. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't remember what we settled on last. It's because I can't tell the difference between what the ordinance committee did and what we did. I just don't remember what we settled on last time being quite as general as A1 now is. I could be wrong, but I thought we had kept some of the more specific language about the conflict between the job and the person's interest in what we had submitted to them. Maybe I'm wrong, but and again, it's not a huge deal. I really was just flagging that I feel less confident in reading this section than I know what a conflict of interest is than I did in our previous language.
I will concur with Nora that I'm that, you know, although we had a lengthy, detailed discussion about this, quite frankly, the changes, I just can't tell what the changes were relative to, you know, what we agreed to.
Understood. Cara, why don't you jump in as you've been so kind?
I wasn't at the last meeting, so I don't know what you all talked about. But I think that when you start getting into the financial conflicts and the personal conflicts, you have to read this section in conjunction with 32.8 prohibited gifts. And I think that since Councilman Livingston is the common denominator from last year carrying through to this year, he's probably reading those two sections together. And there might actually be a gap between the two sections, but that's a different issue for now. But if we're going to make any changes, we just have to make sure that we're not making it conflict between those two sections.
And so my comment now, before we spend too much more time on this, and I'm open to all of your thoughts on this, is before we go redoing this back to something we like, as I started off by saying, we liked what we submitted to them. They went and changed it. They get the final say. They are still tweaking it, according to Tom Livingston, as they weren't ready to vote on it Tuesday night. They wanted it to come back to us, get final quote unquote feedback. I didn't want to make the executive decision to to speak for you guys, not have this meeting and say, no, we'll just wait on you. Before we hash out another 20 minutes of going over this, my recommendation would be that we wait their final word. And once we see it, if we have critiques, then we can discuss it and bring it to them. My concern for any of this is that even the grammatical change we made, which I think we all consensus agree on, they may end up redoing the paragraph or the first sentence anyway. So out of respect to each and everybody's time, I'm not sure I want us to spend 20, 30 minutes redoing it only to have them disregard it and go in a different direction to begin with. What are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more.
I think that's what's going to happen anyway. But just on my own general comments, I think I know where they may be going.
Mhm.
Another issue that we haven't discussed yet, because we've been concentrating on what Nora's concerns were.
What were, while we're at it, Cara, what were some of your concerns?
I think there's a gap between 32.4C
Mhm.
and 32.8C, which is the prohibited, the exceptions to the prohibited gifts. I think there might be a slight gap there.
Mhm.
That if you recall, a year ago, they were very concerned on 32.8C that you have council people who are accepting tickets to events. They're sitting on boards of organizations. And if you look at 32.4C, what was it, paragraph 6? I think it's paragraph 6. We touch on that again.
Yeah.
And they might be concerned that we haven't gone ahead and said that if you accept a gift under 32.8C, it's not a conflict of interest. That may be where what they're worried about and where they're going. So whether we make that change tonight or not is a different issue. Whether we wait to see if they pick up on that and they want to discuss that, we can do that too. I just think that they may be worried about that because Councilman Livingston would be someone who would tend to read the document as a whole, beginning to end, to make sure everything's cohesive for the entire section, entire chapter 32 of the code.
No, that's something that we've been discussing as we've been parsing this section by section, is when read out of context or out of the whole document, you can miss some things. What I will say to your point, Cara, is I do, this isn't their final copy, so I suspect that it will come up. If it doesn't, 6 doesn't undo 32.8 because 32.8 is in the code. However, we can certainly in number 6, make a reference to see section 32.8 for further clarification, or is some sentence like that.
I think they're just looking for us to tie them together, but I can't say that specifically because I haven't gone to the ordinance committee because of other obligations, so.
Yeah, no, understood. So,
Well, Geraldo joined the meeting, so I don't know whether,
oh, is he there? Oh, yes, he
Geraldo's
is.
on.
Hey, Geraldo. Unmute yourself for a sec, Geraldo.
Hello.
Sorry, I didn't notice that you joined.
Yes, and I didn't realize I was muted.
Nope, not a problem. Did you, what part did you come in? Did you hear what I said about what the ordinance committee, that they're still finalizing it, and I don't want us to spend too much time belaboring each nuance that they might change anyway? Did you hear that part?
Yes, I did. And I heard Kara's
Yep.
portion also. But Kara,
Okay, go ahead.
one thing I would ask with what Kara was saying is the only person from the last session is Livingston, right?
Correct.
I don't know how much of that would be a carryover unless it's something he still wants to deal with.
He's actually the one that's doing it. So
Okay.
he is taking charge along with at least one other person on the ordinance committee, but he seems to be the one, at least in this past ordinance committee, that he said that he still had some tweaks and revisions prior to sending it back to us.
Okay.
so, and he was very active and vocal in the concerns with 32.8C on exceptions to prohibited gifts.
Correct.
He wasn't the only active council member. There were other council members who are no longer on the council.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Michael Corsello and Doug Hempstead
Doug,
also
yeah.
raised issues similar to what Tom raised, but Carr is right. Tom's kind of spearheaded, along with Lisa Shanahan, the chair of the ordinance committee. Those two have really spearheaded the changes to 32.4. And Michael's correct. They did indicate that these were not the final changes that were going to be made. They asked me and Michael, and our recommendation was for them to finish their changes so that you could then take a look at it, as opposed to you guys making changes to something that might already be changed anyway by the next time they look at it. So, and to avoid making changes twice, but they wanted to see what thoughts you guys had specifically about this 1 and 2 to start. The conflict of interest means any of the following 1 and 2.
So I think
it's difficult though, because I don't know when Tom's saying he wants to make changes and stuff, I don't know where he's talking about. Is he making changes in the section that we're talking about or other places in the document?
So my recommendation is we'll have the minutes from this meeting. Either Brian, you can convey what we discussed right now, or I'm happy to send a note over to Tom to express Nora's thoughts, Cara's thoughts, and just, they might be doing those anyway, but just share with them how we changed the first paragraph in our concern.
Yeah, if you
was
Michael,
section
if you guys,
C.
Yeah, if you forward me an email, I'm more than happy to forward it on to Tom, and I'll copy you on it, and then I'll send another copy to each of the Board of Ethics members, so this way they can see what was sent to ordinance. And then once I get a meaningful response from ordinance committee, either saying how they're going to make the changes or the actual changes, I will send them all to you guys so you can see them as far in advance of the next meeting as possible. When I get it, you guys will get it.
Sounds good. So before we motion to adjourn, is there anything else that we would like to discuss or go over?
Brian just said that who try to get us the material as soon as possible, as soon as before the next meeting. But you said at the outset that the next meeting is likely not
January.
until next year.
Yes.
So what I meant was, when ordinance committee, they're working on language. Tom Livingston and Lisa and possibly someone else are working on draft language to proposals that they want to make to revisions to 32.4 currently that you see in front of you. They're going to make more changes to that. They're going to send it to me. As soon as I get that, I will forward it to you, because odds are they're going to ask me to put it on again at the November ordinance committee meeting. That was the committee meeting that I was talking about. And then if necessary, if this is something where they're like, listen, we're close, but we want you guys to weigh in, we can either try to fit in a special meeting at some point in November or December, or we can just wait until January. It's really up to the board.
Okay.
Correct. And on that point, especially with how this is going, I think realistically, we're not going to have a meeting before Thanksgiving. It is possible in mid-December, if they want us to vote or approve something before their December ordinance committee meeting, we might jump on something, but most likely we'll be hearing something in the December timeframe, and therefore we can go over it in January. And we'll cross that bridge as we get there. But I do believe realistically right now, just with where we are on the calendar, it's best to wish each other all a happy Thanksgiving, stay safe and healthy, and expect to reconvene in the new year. Anything else before a motion to adjourn, or do I hear a motion to adjourn?
You hear tears dripping.
I'll
Happy
second.
Thanksgiving. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year.
Happy
Happy
holidays.
everything else.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it. Everybody stay safe and healthy.
So I got was
Thank you.
late.
Thanks.
Meeting adjourned.
Take care.
Motion
Bye-bye.
carried.